Call the September Planning and Zoning meeting to order. Start with a roll call. Chairman Frederick is absent, Mr. Cordenoy is absent, and Mr. Karski is absent. Present are Mr. Franchuk, Ms. Dukart, Mr. Bush, and Acting Chairman Mr. Bollinger. We do have a quorum. Order of business, any changes or corrections to the order of business?
Mr. Chairman, there are not. Thank you.
All right. Entertain a motion to approve the order of business as presented. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bush, second by Ms. Dukart. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Minutes of the August 19th meeting were presented for review. Anybody have any questions, comments, or motion to accept or deny?
I have one correction, minor correction, number 2 under PUD. I second a motion, and it doesn't say my last name. I think I should have that in there.
Record reflect, we'll add Ms. Dukart to the motion. Did you get that? Thank you. Okay, with that, anybody care to make a motion to approve with the changes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minute.
Motion by Ms. Dukart. I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. All right, takes care of the formalities. Get into the action items, starting with item number 1, preliminary plat request to consider a preliminary plat for the replat of lots 1 through 7, Block 5, Pinecrest First Edition. This has been before us before. Mr. Hadley, are you kicking this off?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes. This item was tabled, as you know, from last month's meeting. There was a number of engineering and other items to resolve or discuss. I believe the applicant has done that. Engineering has provided some feedback of all those items that need to be addressed prior to a final plat being done. Obviously, engineering's here. The applicant is here. They have another presentation to give as well, and they can address those items. If you remember in the staff review, there were 19 conditions of approval. I think one of the topics that we talked about before that were kind of a hot topic that hasn't been resolved is the private agreement with the adjacent landowner. And that adjacent landowner feels he has a right, and my suggestion to the commission would be that that item be resolved. I don't believe the applicant feels that they have that responsibility to that owner because there are different parties involved and it's a different development. My suggestion would be that we would add condition number 20, that the applicant would resolve that issue prior to coming back for a final plat review.
Well,
through this board.
Is that in regard to the trees or the fence?
The fence.
Fence, okay.
Yeah. The deed restriction or the screen between the commercial properties to the east, I feel is valid, and I think that's something that we had talked about and discussed. So that would be included in their development agreement. With that, I don't think I have anything else to add to that. I haven't had any more comments from the public. Haven't really had any more dialogue on this project except with the applicant. So with that, I'd maybe let the applicant address some of those items, and then if engineering has any comments or if they have any questions on clarifications for the conditions of approval, then we can move beyond that. And then it's a public hearing, obviously.
Very good. The applicant would like to come forward, state your name and your presentation.
Good morning, Commission. Blake Carlson here, an architect working on behalf of the owner here. So continuing our discussion from last month, I have a few updated slides. Again, we received the comments back from engineering. Our engineer and surveyor has been working on that and are addressing and resolving these issues. We've updated some of our street section based on our discussion last month. We'll show you some images of that. We want to continue the discussion on a few of these unresolved issues. One of them being the street parking, and then as well as buffering to the east commercial lots and the north, Mr. Decker's property. So I guess if we maybe just go through the slides here, you've seen these. I don't have a clicker up here, so I don't.
Fair point.
Oh. You've seen these. Again, just a reminder, one of the driving forces of the development is we love the trees that are there, trying to make a solution that keeps the trees, takes full advantage of them. And to do that with this PUD, just making the road a little bit narrower right away than what is typical is one of the big things we're trying to do. And we think our solution is a good one. Just changing the zoning and future land use to preliminary plat. Again, this is the conceptual development we discussed before. An update here, so we added the second sidewalk on the inside loop of the drive, and so I know that was a strong feeling of the commission. So just in street section, it's a 36-foot street from inside a curb to inside a curb. There's a 5-foot green space on the inside, and then a 5-foot sidewalk on the outside. We put the sidewalk right up against the curb there. So just I thought we could just kind of discuss kind of the pros and cons of a one-sided versus two-sided parking. I know there were some different thoughts on that last month. One concept was thrown out, the idea of one-way. We don't feel that we would like to do a one-way street. We really want to do a two-way street. We really want to stick to this 36-foot width. We really don't want to go wider than that for the street. And so we had proposed parking on one side, and we're fine with that. We're also fine if you feel it should be both sides. I think it would work. We feel it would work either way. So what this shows is where parking could occur potentially in the project. We would have no parking signs around the curves there, so that there's adequate turning radius for emergency vehicles, waste. So in winter months especially, there'd be no issue getting around curves. And so what we're left with is actually not a lot of parking in there. As you can see, the green are showing cars where they would fit. Just to note, on the outside sidewalk, because it's right against the curb, as the sidewalk hits a driveway, you need about 6 feet to kind of ramp down to the driveway grade, and so that decreases the parking further. So you're really not going to get a lot of parking on either side of the street there by the time you take away the no parking areas. Additionally, just with the HOA, we would propose putting some restrictions on parking trailers or RVs or boats more than 24 hours there. So, and these are larger lots. They'll have room to park some vehicles and extra things if they want as well. So we don't feel like it'd be a issue. So again, we think it could work. One-sided parking or two-sided parking. We're open on that question. So I don't know if we want to just I guess maybe just show you this image. Just compare. I think I showed you this last time too, but just comparing some different street sizes. These are 3 of them are from Fargo here, where I'm from. The 23-foot is a traditional neighborhood, has parking on one side. 26-foot is a newer neighborhood and with parking on one side. The 30-foot, I believe, is parking on both sides. So we feel 36 would work for either one-sided or two-sided parking. there's not going to be a lot of traffic through there because it's a closed loop. So we think it'll work. So that's maybe my comments on the parking. I'll maybe just make a couple comments on the buffering, and then we can come back to whatever you guys want to address there. So it's talked about buffering to the east where the commercial lots are. Let's see. Go back one. Seems this up. So we talked a little bit about what kind of buffering should be here to the east. At this time we're not developing this. Its future land use is commercial, but in our development agreement we're going to propose that that the buffering would happen at the time of the commercial development, whether that be tree, fence, or a combination. Just not knowing what that's going to be. That's typical, is that the buffering would be required for the commercial to go in rather than vice versa. So we're proposing to do that at the time that a proposed development would happen there. And then, as mentioned, to the north here, the owner feels that it wouldn't be beneficial or appropriate to do fencing as was proposed in the agreement that's been discussed with Mr. Decker. That agreement was in place for a commercial proposal that was totally different than what we're proposing, and it was commercial surrounding the whole property. That never happened. That never materialized. The owner here doesn't control the property to the west or to the north. So even if we wanted to do a fence around Mr. Decker's property, we don't have the authority to do that, and feels that we feel that agreement is not appropriate anymore. So I guess that's the owner's position on that. Normally you wouldn't need to buffer residential to residential like that, especially there's already a lot of trees there anyway. So I'm available for any questions or comments to discuss these items.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Does anybody have questions for Mr. Carlson?
A couple clarifications, Mr.
Yep.
Chairman.
Mr. Head?
Mr. Carlson, could you, on the map that you have up there right now, the green on the outside, that would be the areas that you're designated that could potentially be on-street parking, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So the green is one car, basically. The red would be a no parking area.
So for the
Signage.
commission's view, we do need to, I don't think we've made a formal directive on whether we have parking on the outside or not. So that would be one thing. Mr. Carlson, also, could you address, do you have any concerns or questions or clarifications on the engineering comments that were provided?
I think we're on track to resolve those. The engineers and surveyors are on board and addressing those. We don't see any major issues. We just have to, they will be addressed fully with the final plat that will come forward.
And then the last question, sorry, Mr. Carlson. The agreement, this development group, maybe for the commission's benefit, is it the same group that developed Pinecrest before, or is it a mix?
It's a different group. It's a different LLC that owns this property to the south. The original group dissolved. That there was a contract over some of the Frenzel land to the north and the south that never was purchased. The deal never materialized. Some of the same players are in on this development, but it's a different team. It's a different ownership. It's a totally different concept. So it really doesn't, the agreement really can't work with this new proposal.
Sorry, and thank you. The reason I asked that of you was to clarify my initial comments on condition number 20. So that could be something that would be resolved prior to final plat.
Okay.
Have our legal staff discuss with their legal staff on whether or not that's a valid condition for us to place on it. if it is, we can surely put it on the final plat.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hadley. Any other questions for Mr. Carlson?
I just wanted clarification. There will be sidewalks on both sides?
Correct.
For
Sidewalks
all
on both
parties?
sides.
Okay. I guess I like the parking, or the driving going both directions.
Yes.
Parking, no parking around the corners is great because it's a visibility issue. I got a lot of comments, I'll tell you what. I got phone calls and comments because I'm out there in the public, and they would like to see it as a state edition, a second look like the state edition, because that's where people prefer to live. So the nicer we make that, the more money they're willing to pay for these lots. One of the comments was make them bigger and less. So for me, it's hard to tell, but I think they're all still about 16 to 18,000 square feet, right?
Yeah, actually, the large ones are about an acre, 40,000 square feet. The smallest lot is about 10,500.
Okay.
Some are, yeah, most of them are like 13, 14,000 square feet. Potentially somebody could buy 2 lots if they want to spend the money for that, if that's their desire. I don't know. Kyle Kuntz is here helping us out on just what the appropriate marketing and price point is. We haven't landed there yet, but he may be able to answer additional questions from that perspective.
No, I think I'm okay.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Cart?
Nope.
Okay, personally, I think, I'd prefer to see a two-way. I like the sidewalk on both sides, obviously, and then the parking. I think it appears that you've addressed most of what our concerns were at the last meeting. Any other comments, questions from Mr. Carlson?
I think the parking on 2 sides is going to be necessary. If you take the parking to one side, and that's pretty thin for that many homes.
Sure. I agree. Okay. You have anything else, Mr. Carlson?
Maybe just one more note on the parking. If we did do 2-way parking, if there was an emergency vehicle that had to get in the winter, and there's 2 trucks on the other side, there's not a lot of traffic going through there. At the very least, a car coming the opposite way could stop or back up. I think we have enough room there for those kinds of rare situations, so especially when we prohibit the parking on the corners. So,
Sure. Thank you.
And one more question. There's just one way in and out, right?
yes, just a little history. Originally, when we were working with engineering on the plan, the original we had the development go all the way to 30th, and because of the future land use, that was not a desire to go all the way to 30th. So we kept the commercial lots there, and we shrunk up the size of the development to accommodate for that. And then there's a limit on the number of lots per one entrance, and we're under that. So it's kind of we talked through that with engineering early on, and we think this works.
And the plan for access to future development to the east would be or before the first row of trees on the bottom?
Yeah, so right now,
Okay.
this would be an access.
There
This
you
is an easement here to get up there. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Carlson.
I've got one more thing. I'm assuming the flared entry driveway as opposed to the 90-degree that's shown on this plat that I'm looking at, that's correct, right?
Down
For
here?
entry? Nope, up above.
Up here.
Yep. The curve, that one lot lost a little bit, it looks like, and to the right. Whereas what I'm looking at on the plat here, it looks like it's a 90 on it.
Okay, yeah, so the plat doesn't represent the roads, that's just the easements or the right-of-ways there. There's a few details we have to update, just the radius corners on the plat. So that's one of the one of the things that you'll see for final plat.
Okay. Very good. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I have
Mr.
a
Decker.
question for Mr. Hadley or engineering. The storage pond, the water storage pond, is that going to be the responsibility of the HOA, or is that going to fall upon us eventually again?
Well, I think we've had this discussion in the past that, you know, the city doesn't really want to take on those ponds for maintenance, but inevitably, historically, I guess, we have ended up with those ponds when HOAs haven't been able to be put together and haven't moved forward. So I can let the applicants speak to their intent, but I know we just try and prepare for the ending up with it. I don't have a better solution for you at this point in time of how we handle those ponds.
So then are we going to make a requirement that that pond is built to a specific,
We would have that requirement either way.
because what we've dealt with in the past with these developments and their ponds?
And that requirement would be a condition of the final?
Mr. Mayor, if I just mention, we discussed that with engineering too, and if the city would prefer to, we could dedicate the pond area to the city, but I guess, again, we do it either way, whatever the preference of the city is, or the homeowners association deal with it. So, but I think that was the preference, is that it's a homeowners thing.
Then I have a couple other things. I see no park in this area. Is there not a requirement, or ownership group, are you paying the park district to not have a park?
Our plan was to pay the fee in lieu of park at this point.
Yeah,
We did.
They have worked, sorry, they have worked with Park and Rec, and they are working those details out. I don't believe Park and Rec has designated a park in that area.
We have a lot of development out there and there's no park.
None.
So we have a lot of children that are going to be traveling because there is no park. We have nothing out there. You have 2 apartment complexes. You have another housing development to the west, no park. This won't have a park.
I would say that, I guess, one option, Mr. Carlson, is that you could reach out to Park and Rec and say there's a concern for lack of parks, and if there was the ability to use some of the other property that's available out there that you have to utilize as a park, maybe that would be an opportunity to not pay in lieu and have land that they could develop as a park. Might be an option.
Sure, I'm happy to circle back with them here. Our initial conversation, I guess, they seemed very comfortable with what we had proposed, but we're willing to have that conversation again.
Maybe you can reference it. I think we probably have a concern as a group here that that area does have a number of lots platted and a number of other homes planned, not just in your area, but throughout that little region. And yeah, the mayor's correct in that we don't have any plans for anything out there.
And I guess my other thing would be the agreement. LLCs come and go. We all know that. And I think that needs to be rectified.
Yep. I agree with President Decker and Mr. Hadley. Okay, any other questions? Mr. Carlson? Okay. Thank you. Anybody in attendance speak for or against?
Mr. Decker?
Mr. Decker?
Good morning, Doug Decker, 1603 30th Avenue West. So where are we sitting with the agreement then, or one of the requirements?
Mr. Decker, my suggestion was that your legal folks, their legal folks, and our legal staff address whether or not that is something that's valid today with this development, with this ownership, prior to them coming in for final plat approval. By then, we should have an answer, whether or not it is a valid agreement. So at this point, my recommendation is that they move forward, and if the commission wants to grant a preliminary plat approval, we definitely have enough time between them coming in for a final plat approval, which would be another public hearing process, to get this resolved and answered, and then they can make an appropriate condition, if need be.
Okay. Well,
Essentially,
they haven't,
I'm sorry, essentially the recommendation is to add a 20th condition to obtain a clean legal opinion on the matter before final plat.
okay. Well, they haven't talked to me yet about this, so
Okay.
that's where we
It
stand
literally
there.
just came up.
Okay.
So,
And then, does the city of Dickinson, do you guys have requirements or minimum requirements on the street widths at all? Or?
yes, we do. And the minimum widths that they're proposing is a width that we've discussed. It's a PUD, so they can ask for a little less. So it's 36 versus our 40-foot standard.
Okay.
Engineering can jump in and answer anything else you might have, but I think it's something that meets the intent of where we've been going with development.
The narrower streets?
Yeah, we actually have talked about using some narrower streets in residential areas for cost of maintenance, for just the cost for the city down the road, and cost
Right.
for the resident.
Then my next question is, the red dots on there, is that where there's no parking, or?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Yeah.
So where is there actually parking then?
Just the green. Just
Where the
limited-
green,
limited
where the green dots are,
Right.
yeah.
Doesn't seem like a lot of parking to me.
It
And then-
doesn't, I agree, it doesn't have the typical numbers, but on those corners, there wouldn't be any parking anyway.
Right.
It is a planned unit development, so they have some flexibility, and what we're trying to do is not have it choked up to where emergency vehicles can't get in there. So if we restrict it as parking, no parking, then we're hopeful that people will not park there.
Okay, and they definitely have sidewalks on
Both
both
sides.
sides?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's all for now then. Well, I do have one other question. If, you stated that that's not the same developing team, or?
It's a different ownership group. It's a different ownership team. The original agreement involved development of all the land around there, including railroad, and that deal never happened.
Well, I'm not,
Yeah.
well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying who's involved with this team.
It's an LLC. Some of them-
Excuse me, you probably want to come to the mic.
So it's a different LLC. Some of the same owners in the LLC are involved as before, but not all of them. The person that signed the agreement, he is not involved with the team, and we don't think he had a corporate authority to enter into that contract in the first place.
No further questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Decker. Any other comments from the audience? Okay. Anything else from commission?
Just
We-
one for engineering, public works, everybody's agreed on this, they've all, I mean, as far as garbage, fire, everything's okay?
Ms. Dukart, Commissioners, yes, we have gone through our standard process of reviewing. So all the departments have had a chance to look at these layouts and weigh in, and that's how the discussions have moved from the narrower, I think we started with 30-foot wide streets, to this current layout to make sure that, fire, the garbage truck, snow plows, that functionally it will work better with this wider width. So that's how we came about these discussions and this presentation that you're getting today.
Good. And the City Inspection Department. I want to make sure that everyone's gone through this before.
This
I-
has been brought to our site plan meetings multiple times. So my understanding is everyone's been given a chance to review these. I think typically the building department dives into it a little more when building permits start getting pulled. But other than our normal site plan meetings, everyone's had a chance at those, look through these and give their comments.
Okay, good.
Okay. Anything else before I open up the public hearing? Okay, we'll open up the public hearing. We'll call in
The
conference
conference
number.
is currently empty.
Give it a minute
You'll
or
hear
so.
silence or music on hold when connected.
Any comments from the public? And as a point of reference, do I need a public hearing on all three motions?
You need it, yes.
Okay.
But that's on, this one is just one motion, this particular, the next item,
Gotcha.
yeah, has to.
Okay, anything from the public? I'm hearing nothing. So with that, any other comments from commissioners? Or staff? Hearing none. If we are ready, I would entertain a motion to approve or deny as presented.
Are we doing the future land use amendment first?
The preliminary plat. Preliminary plat. This is the carryover from last
Okay.
month, so it's preliminary plat for Pinecrest. The other three, the Flum, the rezone, and plat are all together in the next series.
Okay, I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend, I'm on motion 3, am I right?
Motion 3, yep.
Okay. Approval of the preliminary plat of Pinecrest 2, second edition as depicted in attachment A with conditions, and also adding 20
Yep.
as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? I'll clarify that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, condition number 20 would
Yep.
be something similar to applicant shall resolve legal issues with private agreement prior to final plat being heard by the planning commission.
Is that appropriate?
Mhm.
Okay, for a motion, do we have a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none. Call for a vote. Ms. Dukart?
Aye.
Mr. Franchuk?
Aye.
Mr. Bush?
Aye.
And chairman votes aye. Motion is approved. Thank you. Okay. Moving along to item number 2. Okay, so we'll take these three individually. Same area. To consider a future land use amendment from industrial to residential for all of Block 1 of the proposed North Energy Center residential subdivision located in the east half of the southwest quarter of Section 16, Township 140 North, Range 96 West in Stark County, North Dakota. Director Hadley, start that off.
Yes, this was an item that was changed in 2013 by the current owner, and we're changing it back to, from industrial to residential. There's an existing home site there. It does meet kind of the intent of the general direction of where that area hasn't developed. it stayed kind of more of an agricultural, rural, residential. The location is just west of RDO on the truck route. So basically the FLUM is just changing the designation from industrial to residential, so they can then rezone it to do a residential subdivision on the south 20 acres or 19.7 acres to the south adjacent to the frontage road of the truck route. The plat is obviously a preliminary final plat that would create those lots and then legitimize the industrial 20-acre lot to the north. With that, Mr. Tews is here, and obviously KLJ, the representative that did the work, is here. I don't know that staff has any real concerns with it. I mean, it was part of our future land use plan initially, and then so it was changed. And we do have a little bit of a hodgepodge, I guess I'll call it, of some industrial that's scattered to the west of this that, you know, would be nice to maybe clean up and turn to agricultural, residential at some point in time too, but it has nothing to do with this particular owner. I see this being a good general rural development down the road. And with that, I think just have the applicant, I haven't got any comments from anybody in the public on this either, so maybe the applicant can add something to that. There's not a lot of conditions of approval on it either.
Very good. Does anybody here speak for the applicant? Mr. Tews, is that you?
Tracy Tews with Dickinson Energy Park. Yeah, I really don't have any further comments. Development has kind of changed in that area since 2012, and there is a house on there, and we do have a purchase agreement on that property that somebody would like to take over that house. So,
Very good. Any questions for the applicant?
And actually, I wasn't able to open up the map. I have a general area where it's at, but does anybody have a layout exactly where
Actually,
we're talking?
for that map? Yeah, we weren't able to open it.
Okay, thanks.
it was the house was Mr. Kuntz's house, Larry Kuntz, and it's the house in between Simon Kuntz's and RDO Equipment on the north truck bypass.
Mr. Tews, while they're looking at the map, do you have any questions or comments or concerns on the conditions of approval?
I don't. Only the last concern that was added within the last week. The house and the property line. The house is already established. The property lines are already established. Without replotting the 140 acres to the east to meet that last condition that the house is 50 feet from the property line. So I really don't agree with that one because I really don't want to plot or replot the land to the east of it. So the garage is a 26-foot garage, and I believe it's 12 foot off the property line already. So from the house to the property line, it is 36-ish feet. It's not 50 is the last request that you put in.
Oh, yeah, I think, and just to clarify, Mr. Tews, I think that actually the intent of that was a buffer on the industrial property.
Correct.
So it would kind of encumber that first 50 foot of your property on the east that's industrial, that you wouldn't have industrial uses right up to that property line. So it really doesn't change anything on the house property. It's actually the property to the east. Does that?
It makes sense, yes.
Yeah.
Well, what do we do? Do we replot it, or do we just put a condition on it?
You can just deed restrict it to, I mean, right now you own it, but I mean, you can just deed restrict it that if you sell it to someone, that they can't build their industrial buildings and put their industrial development within that 50-foot area.
Sure.
So yeah, we didn't want to encumber the house lot. It was the other side. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Tews? Anything from the commission? Anything from engineering or city staff? Okay, thank you, Mr. Juice. With that, we'll open up a public hearing on the motion on the future land use amendment request. We are already dialed in to the conference number. So give it a minute. If anybody's joined us, I didn't hear anything.
Mr. Chairman, if there's anybody here.
Anybody here that would like to speak for or against? Anybody in the public? In the audience? Okay. Not seeing anybody here, not hearing anybody on the phone. Any other comments or questions from the commission or city staff? Any other comments? Okay, with that, we'll entertain a motion. We've got to do these motions one at a time. There's 3 of them. Future land use, the rezone, and the final plat.
I'll make the motion. I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the proposed future land use amendment from industrial to residential as depicted in attachment A, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Second item is the rezone from industrial to rural residential. Any additional comments from the commission or city staff? If not, we'll open up the public hearing. Is there anybody from the audience that wishes to speak on the rezone? Anybody on the conference number? Seeing and hearing none, we'll entertain a motion on the rezoning application from industrial to rural residential.
I move the City of Dickens Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the rezoning application for all of Block 1, proposed North Energy Park Residential Subdivision, East 1/2 of Southwest 1/4 of Section 16, Township 140 North, Range 96 West, Stark County, North Dakota, as depicted in the attachment A, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Last one on this item is the final plat for North Energy Park Residential Subdivision. Any comments from commissioners or city staff? Any comments? Hearing none, we'll open up the public hearing. Anybody in the audience have any comments for or against? Anybody on the phone have any comments? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion on the final plat.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the preliminary final plat of the North Energy Park Residential Subdivision as depicted in attachment A with conditions as meeting all the requirements of the City of Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public safety, health, and welfare.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Franchek, second by Mr. Bush. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you, everybody. That gets us through the action items. Anything else before we enter into our work session?
Nope.
Commissioners? All right. Thank you.
Mr. Tooth, do you want your maps back, or? Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, Starting on the work session, we got 4 items. First is the West Villard district change, and we've got a memo and some verbiage change. Mr. Hadley, or Mr. Josephson, sorry.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioner Bollinger, Commissioner Steve Josephson. Just to give you a little background behind all of this, the city planning and zoning staff is looking over Chapter 39, the zoning ordinance, and looking at ways to rewrite it and maybe simplify it and reorganize it and try to bring it up to date. As part of this, what we plan to do is we plan to come back in the near future with the specific individual chapters to do workshops on them and to take action on them. But before that, wanted to get your comments on some individual items that are proposed for inclusion in it. Some of these are things that would implement policies in the comprehensive plan, and some of them are just things that we found that probably need to be updated and have some clarity. So the first thing we wanted to discuss was the changes to the West Villard overlay district. When this district was created several years ago, it was created because there were a number of viable residential properties that had been zoned to commercial. And the problem was that if they were destroyed, if there was a fire or whatever, the property owners could not build back. They were considered as legally non-conforming. The idea was that these housing units, most were in good shape, that if something like that happened, they would be considered legally conforming and would be able to be rebuilt. Had some discussions with Planning and Zoning Director Hadley about this. We had talked about making some changes to this district so that you could do the same kind of walkable development as you could in the downtown overlay district. So people could take their existing residences and convert them into commercial uses rather than having to destroy the building or combining lots or whatever. They would be able to convert their buildings and and do the kinds of uses in them that would be walkable uses, and then be able to integrate with the commercial zoning district that's on West Villard right now. One of the other things in here was a change to about rebuilding. There was a portion in here that was inadvertently changed from, that would allow for, as I said, that would allow for these to be legally conforming uses. It was inadvertently changed, and it's just bringing it back to the language that was in there before. So just wanted to run that past you and see if y'all had any comments before we, if you have any comments on the proposed changes to the West Villard overlay district, before we make the proposed changes to the zoning ordinance.
And this is 1 block north, 1 block south?
Yes, there's a map that shows you that, and everyone's familiar with that area. There are some viable residences in that area, and this would apply to the commercially zoned properties that have single family residences on them.
Okay.
Yeah, the last page of the handout should address that. Should show that district. So it runs approximately from 5th Avenue West out to State Avenue.
State, okay. Okay. Anybody have any questions, comments? Mr. Josephson? Are you thinking a October timeframe?
Well, I'm not sure when we're going to bring this in. We want to incorporate this into the whole zoning ordinance, so it would probably be later.
Sure. Okay.
Later than that. We're hoping later this year, probably early part of next year. And that's the thing, is whether we bring the whole thing forward or we bring it chapter by chapter. But the idea was to talk about these individual changes now instead of, putting them in there and getting questions. We wanted to highlight some things that would be significant changes.
Okay, very good.
And we'll be bringing more to you at the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, do you have a, sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
Do you have a preference as a board? Would you rather see these come in as we talk about these pieces and put it together? Or, there's some things that we'd have to do with a bigger package, but maybe give us some direction on that.
Personally, and this is just coming from me, I would rather see them in smaller units like this as they come up.
Okay.
And then once we're at the point where we're gonna update the entire thing, then we send the whole thing for approval. But I'd rather see it like this. I don't know.
Okay,
Anyone else
fine.
has a-
Very similar to the last one that we did, very, very similar idea. And just to spin off what Steven said was the Villard area, as you can see, we've included in the Renaissance Zone, and there's been some Renaissance Zone activity. And so this, we're hoping also spurs some of the people that own some of those homes
Sure.
to also upgrade them as well, and whether they be upgraded as a single-family home or take advantage of the Renaissance Zone and go to the commercial. Our goal is to really make that strip a much improved, much updated, addition to town, redevelopment anyway. So,
Okay, that's,
so we can bring it back individually.
we could advertise for public hearing for this. Let's see the slide. Right, the next item to discuss is a proposal to add accessory dwelling units as a permitted use in residential zoning districts. Just to let you know, as Commissioner Franchuk can tell you, Stark County recently did that. It's a little different thing because in Stark County we have larger lots, but this is a practice in other parts of the United States where if you have a lot that's a certain size, you can build an accessory dwelling unit on it, whether it's, as you can see from the slide, whether it's a detached one, whether it's attached to it. It could be interior, could be basement, could be a garage conversion. And the idea is that in residential neighborhoods, we want to provide a little extra housing that would be relatively inexpensive. This would permit that to occur. You've got in front of you, we took a zoning ordinance from a city in Kansas and used that as a model for this. So the proposal is that the minimum size of an accessory dwelling unit would be 400 square feet, and then the maximum size would be 900 square feet. Limit the number of people the number of occupants to 2, and they'd have to meet all the design standards of whatever zoning district it is. I think this was also a recommendation from the comprehensive plan, was for the city to adopt this. Obviously, this isn't going to work on all lots, but where there is an opportunity to do this, would be especially now when we have our boomer population is starting to age, and maybe not just children living with parents, but people taking care of their siblings. It's not necessarily limited to that, but it's an opportunity to build a smaller unit for people to live in. The other thing that we're proposing here is that under this is that the property owner has to live on the property. It doesn't matter if they live in the primary structure or in the accessory unit, and also they would not be able to divide that out and sell that out at another date. We also have a provision in here that it's got to be at least a month rental time, so it can't be used for short-term rentals. So just wanted to get some feedback. There are not a lot of cities in North Dakota that are doing this, but I believe they're starting to look to look at this as a possibility.
Are there minimum lot size requirements, or is that addressed with coverage?
That would be addressed with coverage.
So that doesn't change at all, that stays static as it is now?
Right.
You're just allowed to build if you have the extra space?
Mhm. Yes.
And these are currently allowable in commercial areas, but not residential?
In commercial, yes, and the way the code is written is it's got to be something that, like, if you're an employer and you want to provide some housing for an employee, but it's based upon that. The city also allows for caretaker residents on commercial properties, and you might see those on things like mini storage. So, but it allows it in commercial. And of course, one of the other things is that the accessory structure would need to match the exterior of the existing principal structure.
Okay.
And it would be permitted. It would need to go through all the permitting and site review and so on.
Any other comments, questions, commissioners? Mayor Decker?
I personally think it's a great idea. I think time has come, and like Mr. Joseph said, a lot of communities are adopting this. I know out in the county, it seemed when I was on the county planning and zoning, it was constant addition, and they finally decided, well, let's adopt this and make it part of our code. I think it allows for some people to have some options, if they're caring for parents or even, in some cases we have children moving back in. So at least gives them some flexibility with their property.
If I could just add on to Mayor Decker's comments, I came here during the boom, and there could have been some opportunities and I think there were people who couldn't come here, or they struggled because, yeah, they were getting good salaries, but the price of renting places or buying places was pretty high at that time. And had there been accessory dwelling units, it might have been a less expensive option, viable option for, especially for people who are service individuals. Maybe as I said, the salaries were good, but the cost of rentals was and purchasing land was pretty high at the time. So this would be another option, for housing.
Mr. Chairman, I have one thing to add is that it also, we get a number of calls right now, or I get a number of calls right now for people who want to actually do that.
Mhm.
So that's spurred some of this to move forward as well, from the standpoint. And I'm glad to see that Stark County did it. Stephen and I discussed it, and I think it's really an appropriate time. I've lived in a number of communities that have this, and varies from affordable housing to kids to mother-in-laws to to whatever. But it does fit in quite well into the neighborhoods, and you don't really notice it.
Yeah, and it fits the current environment. I just read that the percentage of 18 to 29-year-olds living with a parent is at a generational high, so it's happening. There's going to be a need for it. I think it's a great thing to address proactively.
Okay.
Anything else?
I have a question that came up to me in my job yesterday. Does the county, and this is for you, Steve, on the county, do you have an ordinance that said the garage cannot be higher than the house?
You know what, I'd have to go back and look at that, but yeah, at this point, yes, so we changed, but the previous ordinance was that, that the accessory structure couldn't be higher than 15 feet. So it was recently changed so that the heights can match.
Because out at the Lutz subdivision, they're mostly manufactured homes, so.
Which subdivision?
Lutz?
Oh, that's actually in the city's jurisdiction,
Yeah, I know.
so. People can always come in and ask, if it's out in the county, they can always come in and ask for a variance. But that applies to residential structures, not to agricultural ones.
No, it was residential, and I never
Okay.
heard of that before, so, okay.
All right, anything else on work session item number 2, accessory dwellings? If not, we'll move on to mining overlay district.
Oh, which one? Oh, the mining overlay district. I had my papers in different order. Okay, this is another proposed change based on a comprehensive plan policy. And we actually looked at an ordinance that I believe it was Beulah, Beulah has. And the issue is there are areas where there had been underground mines that had been built, and I know in some parts of North Dakota people had inadvertently built over them or had built over them, and then subsidence occurs and the building can collapse. Or sometimes in areas where you have underground mines and it's agricultural, you can see holes falling and with the holes coming down and whatever. And the idea behind this was that the overlay district would be in the Lehigh area where some of the coal mines were. It's proposed for that. The map that you have here is one that comes out of the comprehensive plan. And the idea would basically be that if you find out that you're immediately over a mine, the only kind of structure that could be built is an agricultural one. That's not going to be occupied. Otherwise, residential dwellings would be set back a minimum of 500 feet from identified underground mines. Other places where you would have people assembling would be 300 feet. And then they need to bring in some documentation, which they could actually obtain from the state, showing whether or not there's subsidence issues that exist. I don't really anticipate that we're going to get a lot of people, coming in for building permits in this area, but you never can tell. So the idea is that somebody doesn't build over this and then suddenly you have subsidence and the structure collapses.
All right. Not something you'd typically think of, but
And again, this is something I've done some research, and there are other states, that, and communities like Ohio and Illinois had a fair amount of documentation on this. The city of Pittsburgh has an ordinance about abandoned mines. So as I said, I don't anticipate that we're going to, given the area where those mines are, that it's all agriculturally zoned anyway. But, I think this is one of those, for the good of the public, when you're, good of the property owner, if you're going to develop something, at least make sure that it's not over an abandoned mine, or if you're going to, so it's meant to reduce the risks of building a building and then having the incident of subsidence.
okay. Sounds reasonable. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Josephson? I don't have anything. Fourth item under work session, public district development standards.
Yes, Commissioner Bollinger, commissioners, the city currently has a public zoning district, and that's used for things like schools and municipal buildings and so on. There are no development standards in that, and we ran into that when the courthouse was going to expand, and there was discussion about what the setbacks were. And at least to put some minimum standards in here, we looked to the city of Bend, Oregon, and used their ordinance as a guide. And much of this is really meant for any setbacks that are in there would be for the protection of any single-family any residential uses that are in the vicinity.
Okay.
So you'll see that there really aren't many, but at least it sets some standards that developers and contractors can follow.
Sure. So I haven't really reviewed these in detail or considered, but
Well, if
they
you have
seem
some,
reasonable.
if you have comments between now and the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, please forward them on to us and we can make some changes.
Very good.
Hey, Commissioner Bullinger, sorry, I know it's a work session, but I would just had one comment.
Sure.
Mr. Josephson, on this district, is this for all, public utilities also, or just public buildings?
Just buildings.
Okay, it doesn't include public utilities or lift stations or anything like that? Okay, I'm just
This is
making
just
sure
for-
because that would put additional hardship on, Public Works and everything else to have additional setbacks and requirements for public parcels.
No, this is only for this
Okay.
is only for buildings. I
Okay.
mean, those tend to be things that are unoccupied, so,
Okay, just making sure.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But Mr. Zuroff, should you review this and have any other comments, please forward them on to you, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Josephson? I think it makes sense. Anything else for the work session?
Chairman, no, but we have one action item for next month on the agenda, so if you're so inclined, we could have the public meetings on these.
Next month?
Yeah. If you'd like. Or if you'd like to wait, you can surely do that too.
Is it a decision I have to make, or,
As a board, as a group.
okay, I'm thinking
We're just
it
looking
might
for
be
direction.
in our best interest to have Chairman Frederick make the,
Okay,
I could give my opinion, but
okay.
I would be okay having public hearing next month, but if Chairman Frederick sees it another way, I think we should probably bend to his wishes.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Sounds good.
Okay. Any items not on the agenda? Anything else? Any public issues of concern from the city? All right, anything else to come before this body? If not, planning and zoning meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
For which one?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Oh,
I'll second.
apologize. Okay. Motion by Ms. Dukart,
Yep,
second by Mr. Bush. Any further discussion? Hearing none. We
Aye.
stand adjourned. No one's objecting to it.
Rare.
No.